Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session. This is a session where we're going to hear from music directors. They're going to talk about their on-podium and off-the-podium experiences and what we're doing. And we're all going to have a fun time listening about hearing their stories, how they became music directors, and what they expect to be doing in the near future. Having said all that, my job is to introduce them individually. But before that, I wanted to thank the sponsors for this session, Art Allies. And I had to ask how to pronounce their names because it was a little bit different. John Carlson is here, as well as Paola Cacciatore. Thank you very much. The moderator for this session today is our very own AXO representative, Paul Meecham, that lives in Tucson. And just putting a little plug in here, we're not just California Symphonies. Association of California Symphonies is more than that. We are Western oriented. We have members in Hawaii, Las Vegas, and a lot of other places outside of California. So, Paul is the chairman of the Strategic Planning Committee. You may have seen him yesterday. He has a long history in business. Currently, he's at Tucson Symphony, but the reality is he's been with the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic, the London Sinfonetta, San Francisco Symphony, New York Philharmonic, Seattle Symphony, Baltimore Symphony, Utah Symphony, Opera, and it goes on. But one of the interesting things about Paul and his history is he worked very closely with me and Allsap from about 2006 to 2016. And he developed some rather innovative new programs and education strategies for their community. That's Paul. Right to my left here is Dwayne. Dwayne Burrell is an associate conductor in Inner City Youth Orchestras of Los Angeles. Tough job, but somebody's gonna do it.
Yes.
You. He is also a renowned clarinetist. And we appreciate that you're stepping up into the management role. Thank you for that. Sitting next to Dwayne is Sarah Hicks. She's principal conductor of the Minnesota Orchestra's Live at Orchestra Hall. She's a specialist in film music, which is kind of interesting for us to hear about, and film in the concert genre. Sarah's premiered at Pixar in concert and at Disney Pixar Coco. Her live concert recordings can be seen on Disney Plus and heard on broadcast. And we're going to maybe see if we can hear more about that, I'm sure, in just a little bit. Sitting next to Sarah is Jayce Ogren. He is the Monterey Symphony music director. I met Jayce several years ago when I was working on the San Jose Symphony board, looking for a new maestro, and Jayce was one of our candidates. He's a great guy. And Monterey is really lucky to have him. He's also assistant professor of music at the University of Michigan. So he spends half the life here and half the life in Michigan. And when you which parts of the year you're in various places. He also conducts the Philharmonic Orchestra Contemporary Directions Ensemble and the Michigan Youth Symphony Orchestra. So he has a great and extensive background. And then next to Paul is Ryan Murray. Ryan is currently the principal pop conductor for the Modesto Symphony. And he's also music director of the opera in Modesto. So we've got a variety of music directors, and now I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jamie, and welcome everyone. We're going to spend the next hour or so learning more about the responsibilities of the music director and the challenges of balancing responsibilities on the podium and off the podium, and how maybe that's changed over the last 10 to 20 years, and how they envisage those responsibilities and that balance evolving in the future. But I'm going to first start by just asking each of our distinguished conductors to just tell us a little bit about how and when they realized that this was the path that they wanted to be on. Was there a single moment, a trigger, or was it just a gradual thing, or was there somebody who inspired them? So I'll ask Ryan to start, and then maybe he can pass the baton to Jayce.
Sure, thanks. I think it was more of a gradual thing for me. I was kind of always that person in high school and college that was running sectionals or stepping up if the teacher was gone. You know, it's a very popular thing to do. And then I was freelancing on bassoon playing in orchestras, and I won a couple assistant conductor positions. And you know, I initially was thinking about conducting only from the conducting perspective, but over time those positions changed into music director or artistic director positions, and I began to really love the process of creating a season and working with the board and meeting donors and working with the community, and the career just kind of developed from there.
I had a little more of kind of an aha moment. I was a freshman in high school playing French horn in my high school band in Hopeway, Washington. So I'm a West Coaster, West Coast, Best Coast. I was watching my inspiring great teacher and tough on me, you know, in a small town music program, which that said a lot. You know, I was by far the most ambitious student, but he always was pushing me. But I was watching him conduct us and shape the music, and I just thought, that's it. And of course, I didn't know that I'd be conducting professional orchestras someday. I thought maybe I'd be a high school band director, and then I thought maybe, well, okay, maybe a college band director. And then I got to college and had a really incredible college orchestra conductor who encouraged me to go in that direction. And I'm so glad he did, because it opened up all of this incredible repertoire that I get to have contact with every day.
I kind of had an aha moment. I was a very serious child pianist. I was concertizing in my childhood, in my early teens, hurt my hands. At 17, I couldn't really play anymore, and I was crying in my room, as teenagers do, and my dad told me, stop crying, you can still hold a stick. And that put into my mind the possibility of becoming a conductor. I'd always admired Leonard Bernstein. And I did, at 17, pick up a stick, and my high school orchestra was playing Dvorak 8. And so that was my first experience. I will say that I've taken my particular trajectory in my career by making conscious decisions to leave the purely classical side back in 2006, when I looked at pops conducting, in 2011, when I realized the film and concert industry was taking off. So there's sort of different elements into taking me to where I was. But I would say the aha moment was at 17.
I really didn't see conducting. I think conducting actually knocked on my door repeatedly. Towards the end of my undergrad with clarinet playing, I was studying with Bert Hara, who was the associate principal conductor of the LA Phil. And you know, he came in one of our lessons and he said, you know, Dwayne, if I spoke to you on the street, I would think you were some fantastic musician, but I don't think you want to play the clarinet. No, I had started playing clarinet like in 4th grade, and so I'd been playing for a very long time. And at that point, I had done some of the major things that I wanted to do with clarinet playing, and so I was kind of done, but it was something that I wasn't ready to let go. And so he really pushed me into discovering what was that thing for me. And I would have never thought of conducting. I am an introvert, and it still like scares me today. And so, and I didn't want to become an orchestral clarinetist, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and kind of had like a quarter-life crisis. I was watching a Sasson Symphony 3, the Organ Symphony, and it was probably 3 a.m. And it was the conductor, Pablo Jard. And there was something about his leadership and how the orchestra was responding to what he was communicating to them. And he was encouraging them. It was the moment. And I ended up emailing our wind band conductor, our head wind band conductor, and said, I think I want to become a conductor. At 3 a.m. I did text him. And around 6:30, he actually said, I'm glad you said that. Let's have lunch. So we went and had lunch, and he said, I had it written all over my face. He was just waiting for me to wash my face so I could finally see it. And so the process was very difficult because I'm a little stubborn, and I didn't really want to study with anyone. And the folks that I did want to study with didn't have the time. And so I had to kind of learn on my own, and I created my own master's program in terms of conducting. And I've just been successful since then, and taking the long route. But yeah, I 20 years ago, if you asked me if I was going to be a conductor, I would say no.
I'm going to suggest that maybe Ryan and Jayce share the microphone, and Sarah and Dwayne operational that microphone and stuff. So we've all had one or more jobs as music directors in different communities, and you, as musicians, you have your own particular likes and dislikes and things that, as an artist, you feel passionate about. So, every community is different, and what the community is looking for from a music director will be different depending on the orchestra. And so, I guess I wonder how you balance your own artistic interests and passions with those of the community in which you're working in and which you're drawn to. Because I imagine it's different in every place. Some of you have multiple jobs, and so you're balancing that between one job and another. So is there a tension there that exists between what you're trying to bring as an artist and the needs and the expectations of the orchestra, the community in which you're working with? Nice easy question.
Yeah.
Who wants to have a go?
I think there is a tension, and you have to use that as an advantage in a way. And programming is such a wonderful riddle to solve. It's never about one individual working on their own. It is something that's different members of the organization do together. And as music director, I'm the artistic leader of the organization, but there are a lot of other voices that are important. And if you don't listen to them, then you're really missing out on some valuable information about that community and the history of the organization, what's worked and what hasn't. And so for me, I feel like it's vital to bring the repertoire and the kinds of projects that just make my heart sing, like where just my gut says, this is amazing. It brings out the absolute best in me. The concerts that we remember and that really have an impact on people, I think those often spring out of, it can be a chamber group that really believes in something. It can be a conductor leading an orchestra where the conductor, just knows how to get the best out of this piece and the musicians feel it. And this leads to a transformative kind of concert. Those can't happen every time, but that's the goal. You want to create that feeling in the room where people feel changed and like, wow, this experience was inspiring. It makes me want to go into the rest of my week or into the next day feeling like I did something valuable and I'm refreshed. And so you have to, I think, do what you really believe in strongly. And you also have to find a way to balance that with what the community needs, because I love lots of Central European modernist atonal pieces that the Monterey Symphony audience it's not going to make their hearts sing. So you have to meet them in a place of, find that intersection of who I am as a musician, what I love, and where they come to, to the concert hall in terms of their relationship to music, and find that sweet spot. So it's a really fun problem to kind of work out, and it's never perfect, but it's just you keep going and try to find those moments.
I think that because my initial intent wasn't to conduct, my artistic ideas are what the community's artistic ideas are, and so whatever is needed is where I show up, and so and it becomes so much easier when you go with that mindset. So I'm the associate conductor for the Inner-City Orchestra of Los Angeles, and so we have a head conductor, and that's very, very important in terms of meeting our community where they are and providing for them. It's not about what we want to do. You just told me, I would love to do Type 5, but that's just not gonna work, in our setting. And so whatever the community needs, that's where we fit, and that's what we provide. So my artistic ideas are the community's artistic ideas are.
I mean, to coattail on that, I would say the larger question is, what is a music director and what function do they serve? And I think for me, it's a reframe of the traditional model to say, yes, I mean, music directors should provide an artistic vision, but what is that artistic vision? And to your point, is it a unilateral, I bring this repertoire and let's find an intersection, which is one way I think, but also is it music director as more of a civic leader, an artistic leader within the community who also conducts and leads an orchestra. I think there's so many ways of looking at it that we haven't explored completely, and looking into the future and what orchestras mean within their community, what constituents they serve. I think it's really important to look at it globally, not as an entity that is set, that is traditional, but it's a role that's sort of shifting and emerging. And what does that look like? Because that will determine the decision that I make.
One thing that's interesting for me, because I conduct several orchestras that are within, 150-mile radius, is that a piece that might, or a program that might work in Grass Valley and might really connect with the audience there may not be as successful in Auburn. And that's only 25 miles apart, but they're vastly different communities, different orchestras, and a different history of the kind of music that they play. So it really is a fun puzzle, as Jayce was saying, to figure out, what pieces will be really exciting for the audience, what will help the audience grow, how far you can push them before you lose them. I'm also a big fan of atonal music, but I only program it at the university, where you don't have to sell tickets. But it's really interesting challenge, and you also have to think about where your orchestra is and where you want your orchestra to go and what pieces may help the orchestra grow on that way. But I think you also have to be so passionate about your artistic product as the music director. So yes, I have to think about how the pieces fit the community, how we can do outreach, how we can grow. But if I don't feel really passionate about what I'm doing, it's not gonna land. So it's that finding the combination of those things.
Thank you. I wanted to pick up on something that Sarah was hinting at, that the music directors are not seen increasingly as just the artistic leader, but also as a civic leader in their communities. And that's, I think people look to music directors increasingly as representatives not just of as an arts and cultural leader in that community, but also on broader issues, whether it be education or other social issues. And I wonder, to what extent is that getting out of your comfort zone? You're all trained as musicians, not as community leaders, and how easy or difficult is it to see yourselves in that broader role?
One of the things I think that's becoming really exciting is the ability to create community partnerships, both in and outside of the arts. So we've done some interesting things with Auburn Symphony, with local artists, creating materials for our programs, and created this great relationship with them and built the audience that way. But also things like capital campaigns for concert halls and other community improvements, and that all is becoming a much bigger, as you say, part of the job. But I think if you can stand in front of 100 people in an orchestra who likely have played the piece 50 times more than you have, and deliver an artistic message and be comfortable in that setting, that standing in front of any other group of people is actually really a fun change. So it's not what we were trained to do, but it feels like a natural extension of what we already do.
Anybody have anything on that topic of civic community leader as an expectation and of the role of the community director?
That's definitely what our program is geared towards. I wasn't trained in that way, but I think I'm happy that that's a part of our program. And so you'll often hear our music director say that we just use music as a vehicle for personal development of our students. And so and we may talk about this, but I'm dealing with students. Our program goes from 8 to 28. And so we have about a wide variety of students from junior high to real world. And so we use music as a vehicle for personal development and all the great components that come with it. And so we have to function in this role. We have to function as a civic community leader. So, and I know that the community really looks to us for that position. So this works out.
I'd like to think of the notion of a civic leader, not so much as leadership as relationships and how you create those, that they should be ongoing, because often we make the mistake in orchestras of going into a school or working with a community partner where it's a one-off and we feel like we've done something with them, rather than creating a lasting relationship in which sort of that symbiotic relationship continues for seasons and seasons and develops. And also, as someone who doesn't live in Minnesota yet, conducts 31 concerts a year there, it's a very conscious effort to maintain those relationships, but also to maintain relationships with media, being connected to the local TV station, making sure that I'm in a magazine or newspaper once a year, just so that I am present. And I don't need to necessarily be a civic leader, I think, per se, but I'm present in that community, which means people will stop me in the grocery store and know who I am. And I think that's important for the profile of the orchestra, to have someone who is, there in many media and is, I guess, a fabric of the community. And just by that, I think it really does imply leadership without having to.
I agree with a lot of what Sarah just said. I mean, I think it's about building relationships organically, not feeling like you have to be on this mission to be a leader. And so having these specific ideas of what kinds of actions you'll have to take to do that. I think it's about meeting people, maintaining relationships. If you're going to have a collaboration, following up with that collaboration. And I just finished my second year in Monterey, and it's been really wonderful to start to have those kinds of moments where I run into people in town and we have a conversation about the work we're doing. And that has legs. I think for me, I feel like it's really important to be the face of classical music for Monterey County. And people look to me as someone who's going to be kind of a model of what classical music should be like. And the way I do that is through the programming, through the way I talk at concerts, the way I engage with our audience, but also I think just in the long term, developing these really positive relationships where people see that the person who is the leader of music in their community is approachable and is someone who they can feel comfortable with, and it's not someone who's sort of set apart and who's going to impart this incredible art on them. It's someone who they feel comfortable with.
Ryan, you touched, you mentioned the word capital campaigns, and that got me thinking about the fundraising that is necessary, of course, in all, all our orchestras. And, maybe a fundamental difference between the role of the music director in Europe versus the music director in the United States is that there is perhaps an expectation that the music director plays some kind of role. May not be directly asking, but it may be through the developing of relationships, as you all touched on. How do you see, that? How do you view your role maybe as when it comes to fundraising? Do you see your role as a support for the CEO and the board and the fundraising staff, or do you have your own portfolio of relationships where you've come to be the lead, if you like, the lead contact with that, and so that maybe places an extra emphasis on maintaining that relationship, and that's down to you rather than anyone else. So I'm curious to know how you see that.
Yeah, so, I love this side of arts organizations. I love doing fund development. I've done for some organizations where like you say, I had a list of donors that were specifically my contacts, and I set up the meetings, and I don't think that's the best way. I mean, it can work, but the best way is when you're really working in tandem with your organization. And I'm lucky in my organizations, we have fantastic people in these fund development positions. So they are really keeping in touch with all donors throughout the year, but I tend to have one-on-one meetings with most of the major donors for my organizations, and it's really fun because you really get to hear you get a real pulse on why people are either excited or not excited about what you're doing, and where you can fit your community even better. But also these are people who are really passionate about what you're doing, so it's just great to spend time with them. And the more you can create these relationships and the more you can build this type of program, the more it frees you up to do the artistic things that you're either really excited about or you think will make a big mark in the community.
Others have thoughts on this topic. And I think, because we all grew up in the United States, we're kind of, we're used to it, that's the culture. Some of us have orchestras where our music directors are not from the United States, and so they didn't grow up in that culture. They might have grown up in a country where funding was all from the States. So part of this might be that, you're sitting in front of music directors for whom they didn't know any different. This is just the system in which we operate. But anyway.
It's my weakest and I'm so lucky that I have a director who loves to do it. He loves going out, and he doesn't. He's like, don't even think about it. No problem. But I definitely am learning. But yeah, I definitely.
I would briefly say, sorry.
Go ahead, sir.
That the one-on-one relationships are very, very key, and that's a great way to bring in donors individually. Corporate donorship also sort of is based on those individual relationships. But I always think about, in terms of development, you have a personal connection, you can bring individuals in. And then I think part of the responsibility of the music director is to make sure that that relationship is not just with the individual, but with the organization. Because our assumption, I think, is that we don't stay forever, but the organization is forever. So how do you make this, connections through you so that you're a conduit and not the only point of contact? And when I do my fundraising, because I'm not a music director, and I don't work with the California Orchestra, but I do have very long relationships with orchestras on the West Coast, and even not affiliated do help them with fundraising. And so I'm very aware of the necessity to build a relationship with the organization rather than with me. And maybe my experiences with you, but I put it out there as a thought.
I think maybe my feelings about working with donors or development lies somewhere in between Ryan and Dwayne. Sometimes it's really fun. We have donors to the Monterey Symphony who I've developed relationships with, or donors in my past work, where we have these incredible, sophisticated conversations about repertoire, and they really know exactly what they're getting to and the value behind it. And then there are other folks where I have to drive the conversation. I have to keep the fire going. And that's a challenge. Sometimes it can be that way with an orchestra too. It's that chemistry just between two people, or between a conductor and an orchestra, isn't quite there. And that's a challenge, because at least I feel like I have a mandate to keep every one of those relationships positive and strong. And so that's a challenge, but it's overall a rewarding one. And I would just say one thing that we've been doing in Monterey that I think has been a little different and quite successful is we've been doing some events that bring donors, top-level donors, into the concert hall that have a really, really strong musical component at the center. So we've been calling these on stage. We'll bring in a guest artist. The audience sits on stage, and they're very, very close to the performer. Then they're getting to have a drink and some bites, the bass cases and the orchestra shell, and get that backstage kind of look, which I think helps them to feel closer to us and what we do, close to the music. And that, of course, for me is also an opportunity to talk to people. And so whenever there is a context set up where I can do what I feel like, I can take my strength in this area, which is to just preach the gospel of great music and tell everybody what we do, and I think it's important, and they should, that's where I feel like I'm the cleanup hitter. So put me in coach in that situation, and then I
In those moments where I wasn't prepared to talk to. This was just shifted what we're doing. That's fun. That's totally fine. And I've had moments where, yes. those moments are great, but we are.
Let's shift gears.
We're professional. I think to a certain extent, that's the broader arc with visual elements and media and screens with this generation. It's accelerated the reliance on that, and I think the declining ability of these young human beings to interact socially in a healthy way. And I know this sounds really doom and gloom. In the end, they still play really well. But I don't get the response in the moment that I get, for example, from my University of Michigan undergraduate and graduate students, or from the professionals I work with. I have a hard time kind of cutting through that fog. And they're very capable, and they'll get there at the end. But I don't see the eyes shining, in the moment as much. And so that's a problem that I'm working through. I've heard some from everyone else here, so maybe you guys are experiencing some of the same things.
I work with students. Education is a huge part of what ICYOLA does. But I do believe that we are actually within the whirlwind of a paradigm shift, where we have an opportunity right now to attack that very issue of, okay, this is not working. They do not know how to show any kind of emotion. So then I can go back and think about how can I reteach that, or how can I build some sort of different ideas and different curriculums, different whatever is needed to help these students. And we're at a point right now where a lot of the older ways of doing things are kind of like dying away, and folks are looking the other way, where now we have an opportunity to create new ideas and new teaching models, and build a new structure in terms of education and music education in particular. And so, yes, it's a challenge. Education is a challenge, but I see it as an opportunity. It's like a great opportunity to move forward in terms of music education, incorporating screens, all these different ideas that are beyond.
So, right.
I was just gonna, I agree with everything that Jayce said. It's been hard with youth orchestras, especially after COVID. One thing that's been interesting is just the way that that this group of students shows their emotions. So sometimes I would be thinking like, I'm just not reaching them. I have to think of something else. But then I get a letter at the end of the semester about how emotional the thing was for them and how they loved all these things. You could have fooled me. So I think it's still there, but it's harder to find. But I wanted to speak about a little different part of your question, which was, how does your conducting change based on these different groups, but how does the organizational element change? And one thing I think that's really important is that whether it's a professional orchestra or a university orchestra or a community orchestra or youth orchestra, if you can try to get your fundraising and your web presence and your marketing and all of these organizational, operational things to always operate at the highest level. So even your youth orchestra, should be marketing and stuff like a professional orchestra. Your community orchestra should be doing the same. You can find that there are a lot more opportunities out there than you ever thought. That all these smaller organizations can grow in the same way. So I think that's really a crucial element is to not go, oh, it's just a youth orchestra and we don't really need a good website. It's only the parents that come to the concerts anyway, because there are huge opportunities for growth. So I would encourage anybody to think about those elements of those organizations too.
Really interesting point. Is there a role for orchestras beyond what they're already doing in terms of providing educational services, youth concerts, youth concerts, working inside in the school? So we live in a society where arts education in the public school system is sadly in declining for a long time, and So the opportunities aren't there, that were there 30, 40 years ago. And the orchestras have been encouraged and often have wanted to step up and help fill that gap to some extent. But I wonder whether, as leaders of these organizations, of the professional organizations, whether there's a role to be played to really emphasize the importance of music education and encourage your own orchestras to figure out ways to partner more with school districts. To me, I mean, all the evidence and all the data shows that our future audiences are going to come from the principals and people who either played an instrument or had regular engagement with music at a young age. So those early years are absolutely critical, and sadly, as I say, those opportunities are not there for a lot of kids in I mean, 57% of kids have no music education. Only 43% have any access to music education away. It's a horrifying statistic. And so if unless there's encouragement at home or somewhere else outside of the school setting, then those kids are not going to get any exposure at all. To me, that's worrying, obviously, for the development of that child, but it's self-interestedly, it's also we've got to be concerned as leaders of orchestras that in 1 or 2 generations time, the struggles we already have to build new audiences are going to be that much greater. So I'm just, this is a topic which I think about every single day, and it's not an easy one. And I wonder, to what extent in your roles, this is something where we have to sort of ratchet up. And this is absolutely an existential issue as far as the future of professional orchestras. And what do you think you could do in your role that can help advance this in courts?
So for me, this is a great example of where a music director or artistic director needs to work in close tandem with the executive director and the board and other people on the staff, because there's only so many hours in every day, and when the whole group is working towards this very important goal, I think you can achieve a lot. And then the other thing I was going to say is that this is another area that I think is so community specific. A music education program that works in one place may not work in another. And if I talk about Music in the Mountains, for example, we're a rural community. There is not as much education in the schools. There's almost nothing when it comes to strings. And so we started a youth orchestra up there. And then we started asking ourselves the question of what pieces are we missing in this puzzle of music education? And we realized, well, there's really nothing for the very young kids, like K through 3. So we partnered with one of the Carnegie Hall programs for a music exposure program where people they sing and they learn about world music, and there's this great diversity of composers that's involved in this program. And then we said, okay, well, what about, our youth orchestra feels a little bit like you already have to know how to play before you can be in it. So what do you do now? So we started a satellite strings program where we sent string teachers to schools to meet beginner students after school. We even provide them with instruments in some situations so that we can kind of see that we've got a program that can go from kindergarten all the way up to high school that functions outside of school. Because although we would all love for the school programs to be as robust as possible, I think it's our responsibility as orchestras to help fill in that gap and hopefully be a partner in those programs growing as well.
Is there a role for that intersection between the professional orchestras and the musicians of the professional orchestras and the schools? I mean, I know that's a whole area of maybe expanding what we do. I mean, some orchestras, maybe have ensembles that go into the schools, but I wonder whether, that whole level of engagement could be increased. I mean, well, we have these incredible resources that we are stewarding as professional orchestras and amazingly talented musicians yourselves. How might those resources be better leveraged to inspire the importance of music education in our school system? And I realize we're up against, funding and all of that, so these aren't easy issues to resolve, but
I guess it's a question of access, and in past generations, the implication is they need to come to us, to our halls, to our youth and family concerts, and then it was, can we take music into the community, into the schools, but it's always a question of access for me. And if there is an ability to create anything digital, streaming, sitting on your website that does fit curriculum standards for whatever school district you're in partnership with schools, often including other topics. Minnesota Orchestra did a science and music concert that was an entity that you could come to. It was also a digital product that was the entire concert. It was also a digital product that was individual segments that we taped by ourselves on our own, focus on a single instrument that was available for free to the school district essentially. So that's not going into a school, but it's tantamount to giving access to that information, that experience, albeit on the screen, to a wider educational audience. So I think part of it is reframing how we think, because there's a multiplicity of ways we could do that that was not possible even maybe 5 years ago. And we have COVID to thank for that. But I think, to your point, that we need to use that as a point of strength moving forward, using technology to be able to, have those functions that will aid us in it.
I think there's an untapped opportunity that is very difficult, which is why it's not done so often, is, as you say, finding ways for your professional musicians to do more music education. But it's so complicated because, at least with the smaller regional orchestras, everybody comes in on Wednesday night and goes home on Saturday, and we've got rehearsals stacked, and then there's the issue of funding. But I think it's something that organizations should think about, especially as we're all concerned about, a 4 rehearsal set going to 3 rehearsals, and how's that going to affect the musicians, and this is their livelihood, and if they could come in for another day and teach or do outreach, and then that's something that you can probably get paid for, from sponsors that might be excited about it. So I think orchestras in general could explore that more.
Dwayne, you work full-time in an educational setting. You must have thoughts on this.
Oh, definitely. And it's interesting because you have to really think about, can this really happen, the reality of things. But one of the things that I was trying to work on before I came to we call it ICYOLA, New City University of Los Angeles, ICYOLA for short. I was the assistant band director at a high school for 7 years, and I won't say which area, but consistently tried to get either them to come to us or us to go to them, and it just became the most impossible thing to happen. And I had the students ready. We were ready. I found the buses and all the things that we needed to do to get there, but it just seemed like it was just a headache to get the students to the orchestra, and then trying to get the orchestra to come to the high school or just into the community. It was very difficult, and so there just needs to be some connection in terms of bringing the students into the world, or that's a fantastic idea in terms of imagine the front page of the newspaper, and the orchestra of your town, and you have students sitting within the orchestra. That would give them an experience that will stay with them forever. And so just little things like that, where you can invite the students into your space. Since music isn't happening so much in the schools, and we know what is needed, I think it would be fantastic if music organizations became like community centers where like for us it's the Walt Disney Concert Hall. Like things are happening at the Walt Disney Concert Hall. Lessons are happening, or like, you know, little group cello choir, or, you know, trombone choir, you know, was happening at the concert hall. Or the teacher comes to the high school, you know. One of the things that I am planning to do in the future, we're going to be doing a lot of recruitment. I'm calling them recruitment tours. And so what we're going to be doing is, Los Angeles has a huge, has schools, huge school district. It's 4 school districts into one. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have 4 concerts a year in each area. And we're going to have those concerts at one of the high schools that is in that area. And prior to the concert, we're going to schedule a day where I'm going to have all of our mentors, our teaching mentors, go, and we're going to have a rehearsal at the school and invite all the schools to the rehearsal. And then after the rehearsal, we're going to have sectionals with the students to teach them how to run a sectional, how to be a second clarinet player, or you know, you don't have to be first trumpet, you know, how to be a third trumpet player and why that's important. But we're going to go in and we're just going to teach them. And it's all going to be for free. We'll have pizza and fruits and water. Our associate executive director makes sure that it's healthy. And then after all of that, we're going to have a concert in the community. And so we're just going right in there and saying, hey, we're going to come and bring you what we have, and we're going to teach you along the way. And to see bigger orchestras doing that would be fantastic. Now, is it good to happen? You know, it'll take a lot of effort, but if we communicate to our musicians that the legacy of the art of our art is depending on us going in and saving things, they may want to just, you know, say, okay, I'll devote 2 hours a week, you know, of my time. And so it may not happen for everyone, but hey, we can start somewhere.
One, I think, is there's a good model that's working. You know, others, you know, we're all looking at what's happening there, what's happening there. You see something working there, you'll be surprised how quickly it big more than other orchestras will take that. I wanted, Sarah would use the word access, and I wanted to just ask one more question before we open it up to the floor for an opportunity for questions and answers. But diversity, equity, inclusion, and access are becoming increasingly important, necessary values that orchestras are paying more attention to. We have some members of our panel here who work a lot with universities where this has been much more a policy that's been ingrained into universities and the college systems for a lot longer than they have in orchestras. And you know, to be fair, orchestras, I think, are starting to realize that, you know, they can no longer afford to ignore the sort of historic, ethnic, gender imbalances that have existed for a long time in our field. But what do you feel orchestras need to further do to address these historic imbalances, and other things to be learned from other sectors like the universities?
Yeah, I work for 2 institutions that are so incredibly different. The University of Michigan, where there is this incredibly strong mandate that's made clear to every person who is involved in the institution that we need to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and in basically every facet of what we do, and it makes us a stronger, better place. There is then hyper awareness in the community, so that's one environment that I work in. In the Monterey Symphony, a smaller regional orchestra, I feel like there's a very strong desire from myself and from the Symphony staff to be part of the solution and not part of the problem when it comes to these issues. I think from our board, it's not on their radar still, amazingly, and they're wonderful, people who support our organization so much, but they have other priorities. And so I have to be the strongest voice and the advocate, for practices that are part of the solution when it comes to that organization. And of course, it starts with programming. So it's really been one initiative that I've taken with Monterey Symphony is that we're going to bring back works by composers who come from backgrounds that have been historically underrepresented. So it's not just that we occasionally have a piece here or there in one season, but we introduce our audience to a composer that they haven't heard before. In my first season, we did 2 works of Jesse Montgomery on our program. Next season, we're bringing back another work of Jesse Montgomery, who's a wonderful, one of the leading American composers and a Black composer in the United States. So, kind of holding the audience and the board's hand, through this process, and working long term, it's just a very different kind of riddle to work out in a small arts organization, like a regional orchestra, than it is in this behemoth of an institution like University.
Anybody else want to?
I just say I have similar experiences because at Sacramento State, it's just part of the institution, it's part of what we do there. But I found that audiences have been unbelievably excited to hear these fantastic pieces of music that they, by and large, didn't know existed, composers that they didn't know about, whether it's composers like Jesse Montgomery or composers like Joseph Boulogne. It doesn't have to be only modern music, and in fact, we just did some music, Joseph Boulogne and Music in the Mountains, and the audience absolutely loved it. But as you build trust with audiences, you can continue to show them all these amazing composers and this amazing music. The other thing I think that's important for organizations to think about is a holistic approach to DEI across everything that you do. So the programming is kind of the start of it, but it also is important in the guest artists that you bring. It's important in your music education programs. It's important in every element that you do. And I find that this is another place where working in close tandem with the executive director, and I'm very lucky that all of my executive directors are very passionate about this as well. So you can really make great progress there. And audiences they love hearing new music. Maybe new as in new to them, not new as in modern.
Not your favorite European icon.
That's right. But also it's an amazing way to connect with your orchestras as you're looking at repertoire that maybe the orchestra hasn't also played so many times.
I'd add just one more philosophical idea in terms of, I'll stop there. The philosophical idea is optics versus impact. And I would just put that out there as a thought experiment. And I see some orchestras opting for one, which makes them feel better and perhaps look better, but it's not addressing the core issue. So that's something I would just put out there as something to do. And I will stop at that, lest I get myself in trouble.
Taking time off, right?
I think the real question is, what does it look like in the end? Like, what's the ultimate goal? Do we want the whole orchestra to be Black? Do we want the whole orchestra to be women? Or what? I don't know if we come to a decision on what does it look like.
Yes.
And so we are trying to nip little things. It's like, I think I did it, but we don't know if we've done anything because we don't know what it should look like. And I will say it's very difficult, and I will say from talking to my other conducting colleagues and whatnot, that when you're trying to diversify, it's not very easy. It's not very easy, other than programming, and even that is very difficult. I had a executive director called me. She's like, we want to have people of color work for our organization, but I just don't know where they are. Like, and that's like, that's a regular thing. Like, yeah, that's like, where do I go? And they're in an area where there's not a huge community of people of color. And so it's like, I don't know, you know? And so I see that there's like, folks are trying, but I don't know if we know what we want.
Well, as a CEO, I feel that the future health of our orchestra communities is dependent on the audience looking more like the communities in which we live, and pretty much everywhere, communities are much more diverse than they were maybe 50 years ago. But our audiences today aren't really reflecting that. And so, I mean, you know, if you ask me what my goal is, you know, I would love to see the audience be more representative of the community in which you know, our orchestra lives in. And so all the strategies that we're trying to employ are towards that goal. And that does start with programming, but it's also looking to, we're involved in the inclusive stages work that the league is promoting to ultimately have more musicians of color on our stages. We're looking at a whole bunch of things, but I think our communities, once they start to see that we're really serious about this, and we're you know, we're better will look the optics of what we're doing, and also the impact of what we're doing resonates more with the community, the diversity of the communities in which we all live now. Then that to me is, you know, payoff will be when I see a rainbow of audience. And I think, you know, it's possible, but I think we have to hold ourselves to the fire and just, it is a series of one-off things. It has to involve cultural change at every level, the board, staff, musicians.
I do know that, and I'm just gonna speak for my community, that, well, my grandmother has come to see me conduct 3 times. And that the 3rd time she came to the concert and the hall gave the, you know, please silence your cell phone. And she has a cell phone that made a jingle when she turned it off. And so she got her phone out, turned it off, and made a jingle, and someone was like aggressively shushed her. And she's never going to the concert hall ever again.
Aww.
It's because she was already uncomfortable going, but it's things like that. And so, but I think we have to go in and just grab them and say, you know, yes, you're welcome here, and do things that are welcoming. Going to churches, I think one great idea is to visit churches, and not just, you know, African American churches, but have all kinds of churches, and say, we want you in our audience. Come to our audience, and you know, we'll have tickets for you, or we'll make you feel welcome. And consistently do that. Because if we do it once, it's like, okay, we'll do it once. But it has to be a consistent thing. And just go where they are. And I know that folks at our church, that's a good place to find.
Well, we have a few minutes left, and it's an opportunity to throw that there. If you have questions for anybody here on the panel, just put your hand up and introduce yourself and where you're from and ask the question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Leanne Curtis with Women's Philharmonic Advocacy, and I hope I've met all the conductors since you're our target audience. I do have some free print scores I'd like to give away from my table in the right next to in the reception, right next to the sign-up table and the bathrooms. It's been a very good spot. And I'm so happy to see Brian and Sarah here, who both performed our Amy Beach Symphony edition. but we have a lot of additions. I'm always happy to give conductors free PDFs, free perusal PDFs. I mean, not unlimited, but one or two.
Can I just say, Leanne, that, you know, the scores that your organization is producing and the parts, it is such an unbelievable thing. I mean, it was, you know, I wanted to do the Amy Beach Symphony for a while, and the thought of getting college students through the old parts, and then I found, you know, your edition, and you came and spoke at the school, and it was just fabulous. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah, thank you, that's a great honor. And we have two African-American historic women, Helen Hagen, her piano concerto. I think we're going to be able to distribute an edition of that, a piano concerto by an African-American woman from 1912. She was the first Black woman to graduate from the Yale School of Music. And then the other one is the Shirley Grant Overture to her Tom Tom opera of 1932 that was performed in Cleveland. So these are both sort of pieces that have been dug up out of archives. So
I think there's a lot more to be discovered. Yes.
I'm curious, I've taught cello, and I feel sometimes like I'm engaged with this young student, but it's in a void, into a void, their family doesn't understand, and they don't hear me. And I'm wondering, it's the family, if we could get not just the kids exposed and have these, but not maybe we might resolve the family students so that they also can be.
Yeah, no, that's a big issue, is that it's the families. I had a mentee of mine tell me the other day that he's going to be a trumpet player, and that his stepdad said, like, he's going to be a starting musician. And that really hurt his feelings, like, and he's like, I don't know how to respond to that. And so, and I didn't either, you know, I'm still going to do that. So yes, it is the families. The only advice I would say is just keep inviting. And they will say no, they just have to keep inviting. And one day, the one time that they do say yes, like they'll take care of our sister. Yes.
You know, my family didn't come to concerts until I was in my mid-20s, I think, like after several years of conducting, and because they're not musicians, they didn't really understand. But I think the point is, it's not that they were not supportive, but it just was a different world. But also, don't underestimate the effect that you have on a student, even if their family is not involved, because there may be a time when the family does become involved. And you know, for me, it was through these teachers, you know, that kept me inspired about music and kept me on that journey. And now my whole extended family, you know, comes to all these concerts, but it took about 20 years. So.
Yes. So, actually, I was very inspired by hearing also this problem, a generational problem that you have with the screen being almost varied. But at the same time, this could solve, utilized correctly, the problem of access, because everybody has a phone right now, so even the families. And so, for example, during COVID, I was surprised to hear how many different content, about even, Orchestra. So you have these mini interviews about exactly all the similar musicians. I thought that was amazing, because we didn't know myself. I mean, I'm an artist as well. I'm not a favorite, hopefully not sincere. But I didn't know the life, say, of every single musician in an orchestra, for example. That is so cool to hear. And so I realized, I don't know, maybe focusing on the enhances this kind of practices. Perhaps we have explored them a lot with COVID, but we should keep going with this.
I think it continues. I think orchestras that have a vital social media presence, as much as we don't like to talk about that, it's important. A couple orchestras and conductors have fantastic TikTok, Instagram Reels, all of that channels, and it raises the profile of the organization and it makes it more relevant. And those seem auxiliary, but they're just part and parcel of what is expected now. And I think we need to turn our focus to that as well.
Sarah, being honest, I consider orchestra probably the one of the best profiles in any orchestra in the country. He has a lot to do with that profile. So, I mean, I do think that we should be enhancing that, and I think there was this flurry of activity during COVID, and a lot of orchestras kind of stepped back because there was an expectation of monetizing a lot of it, and I think that was the wrong approach. And when they realized concertizing was up and running again, and people didn't want to pay for additional content, and the amount of attention dropped off. But I think it has to be seen as commercial activity, not anything. Yes, a couple of questions to the back.
Good morning, my name is Alicia Liu. I'm a composer conductor based in New York City. I was wondering if you've noticed shorter attention span in your audiences since COVID, and if so, how have you addressed that or not addressed that in your programming?
I found that every year I program slightly less music per concert. I've really found that audiences don't seem to mind if the concerts are a little bit shorter. I think if you as long as you cross the 90-minute threshold, you're okay,
Okay.
I rarely have a concert these days that's over 2 hours. And I also speak more to the audience maybe than I did earlier in my career. I think that's really an important element. But it's an interesting point. It's like we as musicians tend to think like, how could anyone not love a Brahms symphony? It's the greatest thing ever. But a lot of audiences, that kind of meandered on for a while. So something that we have to continue to address, I think.
So we're coming up to time, but I'll add there was one other hand that went up back there. So let's quickly.
Hi, I'm a bass player. Maybe I failed, but my friends call me off. I just wanted to ask, as like conductors / music directors, like how much of that, like when you're talking to the audience or being a social figure is like 100% you? How much of it do you think is like a character that you have to play for the success of any organization?
Great question. All right.
I'll take a quick crack at that one. No, the way I think about it is I need to be an elevated version of myself. And I think that also goes for when you're being a rehearsal with an orchestra. If you're trying to put something on that doesn't come from inside you, everybody's going to tell. But also, if you think, oh, I don't need to do anything I don't need to talk in a different way than I would to my wife, like you're going to have a problem there too. So I think trying to, and this takes time, I think, to find your presence in front of an audience and to try to, access that comfy space inside. But also really engage people. Like you have to kind of reach out and grab them, and also find the times where you need to just actually let them come to you. But it needs to be within your own personality. So I don't, at least for me, it's not playing a character. It's just that elevated version.
Well, it's a great way to finish. Thank you all very much. Thank you to our distinguished panelists.
I just want to thank all of you for coming. There will be a video of this particular session that will be available through AXO in the future. Going back to Paolo and Young, thank you very much for your support of this particular effort. All of you on stage, thank you so much. Dwayne, Sarah, Jayce, Brian, and thank you.